Thank you. Well, today I want to talk to you about education and really how informal education and formal education can really work together to really help students. What is formal education? What's what all of us pretty much went through, right? Classroom, teacher at the front, teaching. Informal education is a little bit different. It's typically provided by a museum, a nature center, and a zoo, and students really are able to participate in hands-on learning, really real-world learning. And back in the early 90s, informal education really was taking off, and school districts and schools really acknowledged the power of that hands-on learning in those settings. Well, as many of you probably experienced if you went to school here in Texas, when the state started the testing for students at a state level, a lot of that started to dwindle. And a lot of schools were pulling back, allowing students to go on these expeditions, so to speak. And all the informal institutions were like, wait a minute, how are we going to get students here? How are we going to connect students? And we realized that we had to kind of change how we were working. The state has the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. You may have heard of it. It's called TEDx. And students, that's really the curriculum that the teachers use. It's by grade level. And the teachers go through it, and that's how they develop their classroom lessons. So as an informal institution, we really had to look at, well, wait a minute. We kind of need to meet them halfway. How can we do this? So what we did was, like most at our nature center and many other museums and zoos did, is you looked at those essential knowledge and skills, you looked at your programs and how you could adapt and work in those skills. And so we kind of correlated everything. We put it all together. And then we were able to go to the school districts and the schools and go, look what we can do. We can teach your students what you're teaching them in the classroom, but in a completely different environment. And a lot of the schools and the school districts were, yeah, let's give it a try. So we're really excited. They all started coming back. They would have these great experiences outdoors and in museums. And a lot of us would evaluate. We would evaluate the teachers and ask them how we did. Sometimes, occasionally, we would evaluate the students. But we really didn't know how it impacted those students as they moved on through their years. And really wanted more, needed more really, to know where we stood. Well, I'm at the Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center in Cedar Hill. Just so you know, there are 3 Audubon centers here in Texas. There is the Trinity River Audubon Center in Dallas. There's the Mitchell Lake Audubon Center in San Antonio, and of course we're in Cedar Hill. And our Audubon centers, as well as other nature centers, really was struggling with this, and we were really trying to adapt our programs, make them as scientific or mathematical as we could for these students. And really what my point is here today is we really need to customize our curriculum to really meet the needs of students. It can't just be this correlation of standards and presenting it to districts. So I'm going to tell you a story. We worked with a group of 7th graders from a public STEM academy. STEM, in case you don't know, stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. And it was a really great experience. I'll never forget it. When they were visiting, we were walking off the trail with them, and the 7th grader turned to me and he was like, I've never been in a forest. I've never seen a forest. I've only seen them on TV. And it was in that moment I realized what an impact we can have on these students, not only academically, but what we could do for them even emotionally, spiritually. So it was exciting. These students, these were all 7th graders, young men, and they were struggling in some areas of science. So we actually sat down with their teachers and really went through what areas they needed assistance with. And we had a core lesson plans we had for that grade level, and all we did was customize it and tweak it in those areas where those students were struggling. And they also wanted a STEM project for the students to do. problem-based learning project. A lot of school districts are doing that now, and they're really wanting these real-world problems that students can solve. Well, probably like most of you, I have a lot of problems, and I need help. And I had my wish list, and I went to the students, and I said, look, can you tell us, how can we capture the rainwater off the top of the roof of our center? Could you help us design that nature play area for toddlers? And we have this bird viewing area that we really want to expand, put a roof over it. What can you do? Well, the students picked the bird viewing area, and that is a picture of our current bird viewing area. It does the job, but we wanted something a lot more substantial, interpretive for students to enjoy. And they did pick the bird viewing area. So now it's time for Are You Smarter Than a Seventh Grader? I don't know how many of you have seen some of these standardized tests for students. This is a 7th grade question. When you have nothing else to do, go to the Texas Education Agency website, go to those, and they actually have the test questions by grade level and by subject, and just give it a shot. So if we had more time, we would totally dive into these. But just in reading this one, I immediately was like, this is a trick question because there is not a line between B and C, right? Here's another question. So these students were struggling in topography, like the first question, and also in leaf identification. So here's the question. They have this leaf identification cue, this kind of sketch of some leaves, and then they have to identify this tree. And these are kids who've never been in a forest, who've never touched a tree, explored a tree. So what we did is we did pre and post tests with these students. And so we tested them on all these areas they were struggling with before they came, the teachers did. And of course, after they came out to Dogwood Canyon, participated in a 4-hour program where we really rotated around stations where we really emphasized these areas. So here's one of the students, one of the topography maps. And they really, really were having a great time. And you know, you always do when you're out of your element, you're enjoying it. So we're like, well, let's see how much they absorb and where we can take it. And here's, hopefully you can see it. It's not the best slide. But they had a journal, and so one of the lessons they did was species encounter, and they actually got to meet some of our canyon critters. Probably some of them more than not, they wanted to meet. And they also did a plant to identify as well to kind of reinforce that leaf identification. This is the topography map, and that's our trails that are on there. And we literally stuck stuff along the trails, and they had to find it based on the gradients and where they were finding it. And in the bird viewing area, they really looked at, they investigated the soil. What heights should it be? The topography, where would be the best place in the area we gave them that they could build and design this bird viewing area. And they used technology. So these STEM students were using science, technology, engineering for the bird blind, and mathematical calculations, as you saw on the previous slide, to really immerse themselves in all of this. And all of this was emphasizing those areas they were struggling in, because these students take benchmark tests throughout the school year. So teachers know where they're struggling before they get to that state test, okay? And so it was very exciting. So once the students got back to school, I immediately get a call from their principal. Haley, oh my gosh, these kids are using vocabulary I have never heard before. And I was like, yes. And he was so excited. And then those young men took that post-test. On average of all the questions, they improved 10%. On the topography question alone, they improved 32%. And everybody was just overwhelmed about the results we got. They're now in the process of designing their bird viewing area and putting all those measures together, and then they're going to be coming out in the fall and going to be building that for us. We're very excited. So what does this mean to you? And where do you fit into all this? Well, you should be an advocate for children in your community. You should help link students and schools to informal education institutions. Because I just showed you one small example. There are many examples. We're doing this with many districts in the area, including a research study with the Cedar Hill ISD and University of Dallas with 5th graders, looking at not only how our programming impacts them on a state level with their state tests, but also how is it impacting them in their attendance, their behavior, and their overall grades. So by you connecting a school in your neighborhood even to an informal institution, a zoo, a museum, aquarium, even a nonprofit that could really partner with that school, give those students a real world experience, it's really priceless. Most importantly, what you could do is volunteer. Like most nonprofits at our Audubon Center, we could not do what we do or reach the number of students that we reach without our volunteers. And so wherever your passions lie, in a museum, a nature store, doing environmental education like we do at our center, whatever it is you do, reach out, volunteer. Help make an impact on that student. And finally, I wanted to go back to that 7th grader. When I was walking out of the forest with him and he's just deer in headlights, wow, it was awesome. You know, and he said, I'd never seen a forest. Well, he saw a forest. He explored a forest. He touched a forest. And he learned from a forest, but most importantly, he will never, ever forget. Thank you.